Terry Anderson is an American journalist who was kidnapped in Beirut in 1985. He tells the story of how the fall season before he was captured, he was visiting a town in England when, for some reason, he felt drawn to an old church. After many years of being away from God and from the church, he didn't understand why all of a sudden he felt as if he needed to go inside that church. When he finally went in, he had a deep experience of God, so much so that he was able to reaffirm his faith in Jesus. During his 6 years in captivity, he kept going back in his mind to that experience. He understood that the mountaintop experience he had in that little English church was a preparation for what lay ahead. He realized that his faith in God would help him get through the whole ordeal. And during that time of captivity, he began reading the Bible and came to know God in a much deeper way. Something similar happens in the gospel this weekend to the apostles, where we read about the transfiguration of Jesus. Through this experience, the Lord is preparing his apostles for what lays ahead. Now, in order for us to fully understand the meaning of the transfiguration, we need to put it into context. Right before today's passage, Jesus had been talking to his disciples for the very first time about his passion, death, and resurrection. Peter rebukes Jesus for saying such things. And the Lord replies to Peter, telling him, "Get behind me, Satan." Peter does not understand that the path to glory must go through suffering. He doesn't understand that in order to experience the resurrection, Jesus had to go through the cross. This is why this mountaintop experience is meant to convey. This is what this mountaintop experience is meant to convey in the heart of Jesus' closest apostles. After all, the apostles did not understand many things. They knew that Jesus was special. He had performed miracles and healings before them. He had walked on water right before their eyes. He was an exceptional teacher and friend. But up until then, they had never witnessed his glory as the Son of God. They didn't quite grasp the fullness of his identity. Moreover, they could not fathom a suffering Messiah. So Jesus gifts 3 of his apostles, Peter, James, and John, with an experience they would never forget. This experience will help them to realize that Jesus will not conquer earthly rulers by becoming an earthly king. The memory of the transfiguration will help the apostles during their moments of trials and tribulations later on in their lives, especially during the scandal of the cross. This experience will teach them that the cross cannot be separated from the glory, and that the glory is achieved through the cross. In our lives, too, the Lord allows many moments of transfiguration where we experience grandeur, majesty, and beauty. Such mountaintop experiences are rare, but they do happen to all of us. Those moments help us to endure and sustain any painful experience that may come our way. I remember how early in my priesthood I was visiting an elderly woman in her 90s who was dying of cancer. I met this lady when she was well, since she used to come to Mass every Sunday. She was a woman of deep faith and prayer. In the last few weeks of her life, after several operations and as her pain intensified, she began to appear differently. Through prayer, the pain got her closer to God. She began to appear holier, more serene. She would spend her entire days in thanksgiving and prayer as she laid in bed. She was constantly praying the rosary, and she was truly being transfigured by the grace of God. Because she had experienced God deeply in her life in the past, in so many ways. Her faith did not waver in her pain and sorrow. All the contrary, her faith deepened. Mountaintop experiences prepare us for life in the valley. Whenever we go on retreat or have some kind of a mountaintop experience, just like Peter, oh, how we wish that we could stay up on the mountain of glory forever. But life in the valley is what is normal. Every day the apostles saw Jesus as a regular human being. His transfiguration was the exception, not the norm. In our lives, the ordinariness of life is the norm. Yet, what would our lives be without those mountaintop experiences? In the past, I have spoken about the first time that I saw Jesus in a new light when I went on my first retreat at the age of 16. Suddenly, during that weekend, the entire world began to seem differently. Jesus in the Eucharist acquired a different meaning. Everything that I had learned in religion classes finally began to make sense. Imagine if I haven't forgotten that experience after 30 years. I'm sure that the apostles held on to the experience of the transfigurations for the rest of their lives. It would be something that they would never forget. It would give them the strength in moments of trial and sorrow. Yes, we must come down from the mountain to live in the valley of life. But after one has experienced the transfiguration, one's life is never the same. In the context of the transfiguration, we see that Peter and the apostles did not want to hear about the cross, about denying themselves for the sake of the kingdom, about losing their lives for the sake of the gospel. But that is precisely why Jesus transfigures before them, to show them that if they share in his cross, they will also share in his glory. Christianity is a lot more than only the cross. It is also about the glory. So remember, if we share in Jesus' passion, we will share in his resurrection. This last year has certainly felt like a long desert and a year of many sacrifices. If we endure all these painful circumstances with Jesus through prayer, we will experience the resurrection. After all, living in the valley can be great, especially if we take the time to remember those times in which we have mountaintop experiences. So this week, stop from your busy, fast-paced life. Pray daily. Have a conscious contact with God and try to recognize his presence that accompanies us at every step of the way. Amen.